Hello, Professor Morgan here with some strategies for writers and how you can practice writing your skill when it comes to becoming a better writer, especially when writing novels and such. Let's go ahead and when it comes to learning the craft, and I think this is not just dealing with writing; it could be with any number of skills. Okay, one of the things that you need to do is practice. Okay, um, older brother was a drummer, and when I remember him first learning how to play, he had his drumsticks and this little practice pad, and he would just rat a tat tat. He would just whatever before and then so the next thing he did was he practiced some more, and then he did some more practice. Okay, so there's that. You're like, okay, yeah, so all this slide is going to be this practice. No, actually, once and this is again true of any craft. Then the next thing we can do is watch and learn how others do it. So once we kind of get a basic handle of the kind of our skills, okay, we're like, okay, but how, like how can we improve? Well, a lot of other people have been practicing a long time and they've developed their skills and they have certain styles and techniques, and that we may find stuff that we're drawn to that we want to emulate, not copy, but emulate. So we can watch and learn how others do it, and then we can incorporate those skills. And especially if we watch, or look at many different people that have inspired us, that we can take kind of like the best of the of everything that we learn that matches what we are trying to achieve, and incorporate those skills. And then what do we do with that? Oh, well, then we practice, and then we practice, and then we practice some more. Okay, but it's interesting. I've had people say, hey, I want to write a book, but I'm not very good writer. What can I do? I'm like, practice. And read. This is for when it comes to writing, watch and learn how others do it. Read a lot of books. See how other people are doing it. Okay, so to give you some examples of maybe some things that are involved in writing a book, I'm going to give you an example of one of the books that I wrote, and go kind of explain. Um, Again, this is not self promotion as much as it's really kind of firsthand account of things that you may not consider when it comes to writing a book. And we're going to look at the book called The Mirror of the Soul. And this is kind of a unique book in the regards that it's actually based off of a song by Chris de Burgh. Chris de Burgh is a musician. He's probably most well known in America and in fact probably around the world for his song called Lady in Red. And he wrote this years after writing Lady in the Red. He continues to put out music, and there was this song called The Mirror of the Soul, and I thought, wow, this is just a beautiful song with an awesome message, great thematic things, and it actually tells a story. And I thought this would make a great book, and I thought, yeah, well, why not? So I contacted his agency, his management, with a pitch, to saying, hey, I would like to write a book based off of this song. I need permission, and they thought it was a good idea, and so they got me in contact with Chris, and I kind of gave him my outline, my not really my outline, but basically my premise and what I was thinking about doing, and he gave me some wonderful insight, and we put this together. So the tricky part about this is that this book so it's like, oh, well, it's how easy for you. It's really easy for you to write a book based on somebody else's idea. Not really. There was a lot involved in this. So this book actually, I had to look at a few different ways and some things that I needed to do to create this book. Okay, first of all, I had to figure out what genre it was, and the genre that I came up with was magical realism. And that's because it takes place at a real place, at a real time. And, but there are some speculative elements to it. There is, the key element is it's a large diamond that falls from the sky that has, seemingly magical powers. And that's kind of like the igniting point of the story. Okay, I won't go into it more than that. I decided that the story really needed to be told third person limited. When it comes to point of view, I'm a believer that the story will determine which kind of point of view needs to be used. And why it needed to be third person limited is because it's told from several different characters' perspectives as this diamond is used and misused by individuals. That's how it impacts each of their lives. And so this, as opposed to this story being more character driven, it's more plot driven. So because I'm telling a bigger story through multiple characters' perspectives, then I needed to be able to, switch between characters, and I would do that by, either a scene break or a chapter break. But I wanted to make sure that I kept it limited, so I was only within that character's head at any given time. And the setting is in southern France in 1453. Which is right after the Hundred Years' War between England and France. I've never been to southern France. I've certainly never been to southern France in 1453. So what am I gonna do? So how does that work, right? Okay, so I'll talk about that in just a second. Well, I also was trying to figure out my main characters. Okay, so my main characters are going to be Christoph. He is the primary character, kind of a little nod to Chris de Burgh, who is whatever. And I won't go into the details of who they are, but I realized that so Christoph is he's a resident of the town where the diamond has kind of been found. Abbot Ignace, he's the leader of the Loki Abbey, the Abbey Saint Pierre. Where the diamond ends up, where the abbot then, decides that he's going to use it for his gain. The son of Christoph is Lucien. He plays a very important role towards the end. Jan, I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't speak French. This is the French version of John, back in during this time in France, and I had to look that up. He plays kind of like a counterpoint to Abbot Ignace. And then Didier is Christoph's owner. He's a wealthy merchant. Christoph works for him, although Christoph is miserable in doing so. And all these characters, their interactions with the diamond and how the diamond impacts their life tells the overall story. So I had to figure out each one of these characters and kind of what drove them, what did they want, and what obstacles did they face, and how they were going to change over time. So that's important elements when it comes to writing, is to figure out, okay, your characters need to grow and develop and change, because that's what life is. Okay. Now, some of the tools that I used when it came to writing, and I figured it out, is I figured out there's no way I was going to be able to write a whole book based on one song. And again, so I got Chris's permission to incorporate several of his other songs, at least some of the concepts or some lines here or there. And he's got quite the catalog of songs, of albums and stuff like this. So I was able to incorporate a lot of other things. And so I would just listen to his music a lot for for the months that I was writing this book. I just kind of listened to it and just kind of immersed myself in his storytelling techniques and his writing techniques, and and just the different stories that he would tell in his songs. Since I'd never been to southern France in 1553, I actually did research. I did all sorts of research because I wanted it to be living. It's like, what were the living conditions like? How, what was the technology like back then? How did people live? What are some of the basic elements that to keep it, believable? It didn't have to be a main point, but I didn't want them to be able to, they're obviously not driving around in cars and stuff like that. But also some of the political conditions, especially because it takes place right after the Hundred Years' War. So there's some still unrest and people recovering from the war. And that plays a big role in the fact of Abbot Ignace's motivations of what he does. Okay. And then since I'd never been there, I actually went out to Google Maps, and I just kind of found kind of like an area in southern France that this could take place of, and I kind of quote unquote walked around the area. I kind of wish I had the money to fly down, fly over there and look, but this was the next best thing I could do. Got to get a feel of, the topography, and kind of, again, now this is kind of modern day, but at least I could kind of get a sense of place, whatever. And then I also did a study of the lyrical structure of Chris de Burgh's songs to inspire the writing style, because I wanted to, again, emulate his writing style. I mean, it's still the book is 99% my work. Although I did try to emulate his style, and his basic plot line. But I did wanted to make sure that it was a thing. Now, one thing I want to mention here is I got a lot of information when I studied his songs and the living conditions and the political conditions. Um, One thing to avoid when writing historical fiction, or really kind of any kind of speculative fiction, is to do large info dumps of, because I learned so much about living conditions and political conditions. We find ways to interweave these things into just kind of like how everyday life is. It can be done through dialogue, just through comments, just through their actions and stuff like this that can reveal this information without having me to stop the story and say, okay, here's what the characters are doing, but stop everyone. Let me tell you what happened back there this time so you can understand the context of what's going on. No, you can pick up on the context as it's interwoven into the narrative. Okay. So the end result was, again, The Mirror of the Soul that and the best compliment I got was, I mean, it actually sold actually very well, especially in Germany of all places. But Chris himself, in social media, praised the book, that he really enjoyed it and felt it really captured the message, the thematic element, and whatever. So that was kind of cool. It was kind of a dream to come true, but it took a lot of effort to put this together, as opposed to some people say, oh, that's got to be one of your easiest books to write because, you basically had somebody already write the basic storyline for you. Actually, I would say this is probably one of the harder books that I had to write because of all the different elements that I needed to study. So when it comes to, writing, research is important. Figuring out, which style you're going to use, figuring out which point of view you're going to be using, figuring out kind of who the characters and how they're going to change over time are important. So these are all elements that I think that are beneficial when it comes to approaching writing. All right, so there's some insight. Thanks.